In Learning Activism, the intellectual life of contemporary social movements, Aziz wrote, "Some individuals achieve extraordinary things, but I believe that social change is driven mainly by ordinary people organizing, learning, and creating knowledge together. By people consciously and collectively taking steps to bring about change. Not to rule out spontaneity, but most struggles emerge from the hard work of organizing, incremental learning, lineages of earlier movements, and efforts to organize together. Although it is often overlooked, this work is both informed by and contributes to the intellectual work that takes place within social movements, as in social, political, and ecological activism."
Everyday acts of resistance are not always visible, nor is much of the long-haul work of organising that takes place in communities, workplaces, fields, homes and other spaces down the street and around the world 365 days a year. This work is often slow, painful and painstaking. It involves a lot of patient work in small groups and organisations.
Across the centuries, movements of people have come together to organize in the face of discrimination, injustice, exploitation, and oppression. From numerous anti-colonial and third world liberation movements to struggles against slavery, apartheid, patriarchy, and occupation.
I believe in the importance of the learning and the radical imagination found in movements as vital conceptual resources to change the world. I believe in the power of social movements, in people coming together to build counterpower to bring about social change and to contest governments and capital.
Good evening from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you for joining us for this tribute to honor the life of our friend, comrade, research supervisor, Professor Choudry, and activist academic, Comrade Aziz. This tribute is hosted by the Center for Education, Rights and Transformation at the University of Johannesburg and the Chair in Community, Adult and Workers Education, CAWE, led by Professor Salim Vali. The chair is shared between the Universities of Johannesburg and Nelson Mandela University. I'm June, and I will be co-chairing this tribute to Comrade Aziz, together with Nadima and Terry, fellow postgraduate students attached to the chair, as well as Roshan, coordinator of the BDS Coalition chapter here, a campaign that Comrade Aziz has spent much of his time building solidarity for all around the world. Our technical chairs are Sarah and Francesco, also fellows attached to the CAWE Chair. To give you some context, the opening song that was played was a song from Pakistan that Comrade Aziz sent to Nadima, his good friend, when she was having a difficult time in getting her ethics clearance approval. He told Nadima that this was a song that calmed him. As many of you know, Aziz had an eclectic taste in music, which ranged from, like we've just heard, the music of Pakistan, to heavy metal rock bands. Aziz connected with people through music. The excerpts that were read out accompanying that music were passages from Aziz's book, The Intellectual Life of Contemporary Social Movements. These were chosen as they represent what Rebecca Tarlow referred to as the essence of Aziz. His philosophy, his activism, and the generosity of Comrade Aziz. It's actually testimony to Aziz that many people are participating from all over the world tonight. Comrade Aziz touched so many lives, contributed much to academic activism and the struggles of marginalized people all over the world. And perhaps this is Aziz's enduring legacy. He connected people. Tonight, he connects us. I want to especially acknowledge the presence of Aziz's family from the UK who have joined us tonight. I just want to say that this is one of what is likely to be many tributes to honor our friend, comrade, and activist academic Comrade Aziz. We have received many messages and videos. Unfortunately, we are limited by this 2-hour program. We cannot share them all. We will, from the chair, find a way of documenting this and sharing it more widely. So for those who could not speak at this tribute, I hope you will join the many tributes that will be taking place all over the world. I would now like to introduce our next item, which will be a photo tribute in which I'm sure many of you will see yourselves at some of the pivotal moments in Aziz's life. The photo tribute is accompanied by music from a dear friend of Aziz and fellow activist, Stefan Christoph. Thank you, Francesco. Thank you to Mpumi, Katlejo, Linda, Sarah, Mondli, Francesco, Salim, and Christoph, all involved in putting together this photo tribute. The next person I have the honor to introduce, and who has enjoined me not to give a long introduction, is actually the chair, Professor Salim Valley, who's also the director of CERT, the Center for Education, Research and Transformation. And I think tonight, more importantly, probably one of the closest friends of Aziz, who's going to talk about Aziz's life and to formally welcome us. Thank you, Professor Salim Valley. Salim, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Apologies for that. I think it's the first real technical glitch, but it's not technical. I was just remiss. Sorry about that. I was thanking the, I think, over 270 people, June, for joining us to honor Aziz and to celebrate the life of someone many of us considered the quintessential scholar activist and internationalist. And I really, at the outset, need to thank our wonderful students, the postdoctoral fellows, the staff, the visiting professors, the research associates, and friends, as well as Aziz's family, who, although still grieving, managed to assemble this program in a really short space of time. All of us are still in a state of shock. This was extremely unexpected, and we're trying to comprehend the enormity of this devastating loss. As we know, Aziz had many dear friends, family, comrades, and colleagues around the world. We know that all are distraught and are trying to come to terms with his passing. There are many people who are listening to these tributes and this celebration, who know is much, much longer than I do, in greater depth. There are people in New Zealand who knew him from the age of about 18, 19. There are people in Canada who knew him since he arrived there in 2002, and even before that during the anti-APAC demonstrations. And we are thinking from Johannesburg of all of you, and we hold you all close to our hearts. And we really ask you to reach out to the many people who knew him, who are too distraught to spend this time with us, but also to support each other emotionally. We are all trying in our different ways to come to terms with his passing. And I think that one of the lessons is that we have to prioritize caring for each other and sharing the burden of pain while we try to come to terms with this loss. We mourn and grieve his loss, but we also celebrate his life. And I know that there will be, as June said, many memorials to come. Aziz was born in the UK in 1966, and he grew up in a social and political environment of the 70s and 80s England, where the struggle against Thatcherism and the anti-racist struggles by Black communities, as well as solidarity with national liberation struggles, inspired Aziz. He settled in Aotearoa, New Zealand in 1988, where he was involved in campaigns against capitalist globalization, free trade agreements, and protests against the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC conferences, while linking with Maori anti-colonial struggles. His activism, as many people know, attracted the attention of the New Zealand Security Intelligence Services, who famously broke into his Christchurch house in his absence. And in a legendary case, Aziz successfully challenged the state and in fact won a substantial settlement, which he promptly used to buy plane tickets for those who were demonstrating against APEC and other movement struggles. Just as an aside, the massacre of worshippers in Christchurch, where Aziz spent so much time, in March 2019, really deeply affected him. Aziz moved to Montreal in Canada in 2002 for graduate studies, and I want to fast forward because of time. He arrived this year from Montreal, and he was there from 2002, to formally become a full-time staff member of our center in February this year. After a really long and frustrating wait of over a year, largely because of the restrictions on travel, but for other reasons as well. But Aziz was no stranger to us and to our city and our country. For almost 6 years, he was a visiting professor with our center and the faculty. He always sought opportunities and space to visit and spend time with colleagues and comrades in South Africa. And he enjoyed a long-standing scholarly relationship with all the staff and always expressed a profound affinity towards our work and others in our country. He wrote prolifically in that time and produced 6 books in those 6 years and numerous journal articles and chapters in books. Aziz's outputs, of course, as we all know, should not be measured in quantitative terms alone, since it really doesn't reveal the quality of his scholarship and the cutting edge and significant global contributions he made to social movement learning, to knowledge production in community organizations, activist archives, immigrant workers education, anti-racist, anti-colonial education, and related fields. So in our co-edited book, History Schools, Past Struggles and Present Realities, we wrote that political activism, popular education, organizing, and the study of history were inseparable in the lives of people like Walter Rodney, Neville Alexander, and others in their life and work. But this was also true of Aziz. We also wrote that the intellectual educational aspects of organizing for change included intentional education activities within activist and social movement spaces, as well as multiple forms of incidental, informal learning that are not always obviously linked to learning. We said, as embedded as they are in a host of activities, the often mundane but vital tasks in the hard grind of organizing work, particularly in times of trough, particularly in times where mass struggle is not on the agenda. That work, that grind, what Aziz called the grunge work, was also very important. And I just want to illustrate this. I tried to check a few days ago for Mustafa Hanaway's email address. We will be hearing from Mustafa later. And I found this really revealing sequence of email correspondence on the same day, the 27th of November 2019, which really illustrates the point I want to make, how Aziz created spaces, even in hostile situations, in formal institutions, how he assisted colleagues and comrades, and also navigated the formal with the informal. So on the 27th, he writes to me, he says, in response to a book launch we were having, Linda Cooper and Sherry Hamilton's book on renewing worker education. He says, "Hi Salim, yes, Linda just sent us the promo blurb." And he continues by saying, powering through marking before a meeting with the Canadian Labour Congress's Director of Education and Mustafa, since I'm handing him the course I developed and taught for Labour College when I leave. He's finishing his comprehensive exams for his PhD, soon to be Dr. Moose. And I respond by saying, Viva Dr. Moose. We'll send you the program for the Neville Alexander Conference, things falling into place. Aziz responds by saying, well, Dr. Moose still has a couple of years to go. I'm calling him pre-doctor now. His partner, Ula, just started a PhD at McGill this year. And he continues by saying, I can imagine the conference is a lot of work. We are flying by the seat of our pants with this workshop in Vancouver, which will be quite intense, but it will be good to be with Sunera and Radha, Chris for 3 days. And I say this because all the comrades I mentioned are with us as we speak to you. But it's this correspondence gives you a sense of the urgency of things, the vitality, Aziz's passion, but also the different spaces and the way he connected people, issues, and struggles. Aziz will also be remembered for his unstinting, generous, and really selfless devotion to the students he supervised in many countries and those he taught, but also the encouragement and the affirmation he provided to many, mainly young academics, and also outside of the academy, movement activists he mentored throughout the world. We all know he was also an untiring international solidarity activist supporting indigenous, Palestinian, and anti-colonial resistance and struggles. And of course, he spent a number of years with his much-loved late comrade, Mary Jo Naidoo, building the Faculty for Palestine and Labour for Palestine organizations in Canada. Aziz helped activists work around opposing surveillance and repression, unfair trade. He supported activism around food sovereignty and climate justice. He was a strong advocate of education as a public good and championed the struggle for a decommodified and decolonial academy. He always sought to open academic spaces for many activists. And of course, we know he used very effectively his sardonic wit and signature humor against those in academia, particularly, who he considered to be sycophantic, careerists, predatory, and also apathetic. We really feel bereft now, and his loss is debilitating. But we have to appreciate and build on his incredible contributions. It will take time, but we will heal through supporting each other. And Aziz's praxis and vision for a kinder and more humane world will always inspire and remain with us. I want to end by quoting a brief extract from the wonderful tribute the Grain organization paid to Aziz. Aziz was a close friend to many in Grain. He supported their work, spoke about it, and traveled with a number of their activists. And I spoke to Renee Valve a few days ago, and I would really like to end with an extract from their beautiful obituary. And I quote, Aziz developed working relations and close friendships with many of our staff in different parts of the world. He stayed with us in Argentina and Mexico, where he was supporting local struggles against the ravages of neoliberalism. He was constantly connecting us to different movements and activists across the world, such as the Palestinian boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, labor unions, media workers, digital activists, and immigrant workers collectives. He helped us strategize on how to work with street vendors organizations in Asia, brought us in close touch with Asia Pacific Research Network, and introduced us to key Maori activists fighting for people's collective rights in relation to seeds, biodiversity, and knowledge in New Zealand, Aotearoa. Just recently, Aziz helped bilaterals.org create the space for and find a young new team member from Southern Africa. We are going to sorely miss Aziz's deeply insightful guidance, wonderful camaraderie, biting humor, and intellectual heft. His anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, and anti-racism were in his DNA and inspired us daily. Aziz's departure leaves a hole in our hearts, but he has filled our lives with friends, allies, and courage we otherwise would not have had. Thank you, Aziz, for all that you were. We will never forget you. Thanks, June.
Thank you, Comrade Salim. That we as students and staff were very much a part of putting this tribute together with you is, I guess, because of the absolute commitment you have, much like Aziz, of always being inclusive and generous. Thank you. Whew. I guess it is a tribute, so you can expect that the tears will come. But you, Salim, have walked a long journey of friendship and activism with Comrade Aziz. So we also hold you close in our hearts through your own grief and loss. And also grieving with us at this time is Aziz's family. We share this loss with you, and we extend our solidarity to you from all corners of the world. We are now very pleased to hear a message for her Chacha, Sana Ahmed, on behalf of Aziz's family. Thank you, Francesco.
Hi everyone, so my name is Sana. I am Aziz Choudry's niece. Choudry means uncle, and I'm honoured today to be able to speak for a few minutes about the incredible life of my uncle, which I believe should be celebrated. We are all heartbroken and extremely shocked upon the tragic passing of my uncle Aziz Choudry. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Aziz Choudry was a true activist, a freedom fighter and humanitarian who dedicated his life to social and migrant justice and fighting for human rights. He was someone who achieved whatever he put his mind to and was extremely motivated and was never afraid to speak up and use his voice and never gave up. He was the most respectful and humble person I have ever known, who had the kindest and funniest soul, who referred to himself as the Invisible Man, but still inspired hundreds and thousands of people all across the world. He was someone who had knowledge on any topic and every topic, but never showed off or made you feel less or silly. Whenever travelling, he would make sure to come visit us in London and would always bring a copy of his recent book, which me and him would start off talking about for hours, or until the conversation got really deep and I didn't understand the things we were talking about or any of Choudry's references. So he would quickly pick up on this and bring the conversation back to my level and relate to me and the scientific field. This would carry on for a while until one of us looked at the time and realised that I had work in the morning or he had a lecture or a flight to catch. He's helped me so much, particularly in my masters during lockdown, where he was helping me not only with the writing side, but also cared about my physical and mental health and well-being, and regularly made sure that I wasn't having too much screen time, had a good office setup, such as a comfortable chair and desk, and was taking good breaks and going on walks. He was the most caring and sensitive person who always wanted the best and saw good in everyone. When he would share some of his very personal moments, I would try my best to help him resolve them as much as I could, but if I ever brought up a small worry of mine, he would always be checking up on me and seeing if I was okay, and sending me resolutions and following through. For instance, if I had an issue at work, he would send me lots of advice on how to handle the situation, what to say, and then checked up on me daily to make sure that I had resolved the issue properly. I now know he did this with so many of his students, which he would very briefly mention in our conversations, but now I've had the opportunity to hear more about these experiences firsthand over the last week. No words that I say could do justice to the incredible work that he did, always fighting frontline for humanity in every justice movement, especially for Palestine and migrant workers' rights. He went above and beyond to help others and kept his head held high despite any threats or pressures targeting him to stop his ongoing humanitarian work. And there's still so many things that I'm learning about him now, that like he was an honorary Filipino. I didn't know this. I would never forget the gifts Choudry brought us from his travels. He never came empty-handed. He always brought a specific box of cookies, chocolates, and calendars, which was now a running joke that every year he would bring us a calendar. And when we were young, he would bring us children's books and encyclopedias, and over the last few years he'd bring a copy of his most recent book for our discussions. We would treasure the postcards and personal cards he wrote to us forever. I really miss his distinct Kiwi accent, his Dalek voice for kids, and his perfect transitions between English, Urdu and Punjabi, and the long conversations we had over endless cups of tea, the laughs we had, the tears we cried, and the personal moments that we shared. Our daily FaceTime calls and emails from all over the world got me through lockdown, especially our endless discussions on articles and research. Over the last year, we spoke almost daily on FaceTime from Montreal mainly, and then from airports when travelling to Johannesburg. It felt like I was travelling with him, watching him pack up in Canada for the big move, and then the many house tours during the process. He always kept us updated and informed about where he was going and where he was currently at, and he cared about what we were doing as well. As I work in medical regulations, he would be constantly sending me over relevant articles about the vaccine whilst on his travels, and then he would try FaceTime me even from airports whilst he was in transit or between connecting flights to talk about anything and everything. He helped me with my first layer cake, which is now my side business, and I was able to return the favour by helping teach him how to use the WhatsApp video function when he finally got a phone this year, and we realised that the usual FaceTime and Skype would not work from South Africa. Thank you to Jeff for always being there for me from my childhood, throughout my studies and my work life. I still await your FaceTime every day or an email with an article attached, and we feel your presence all over our house and see him in spots in our house where he always used to be. Currently the whole world is mourning your loss. What a great loss for humanity. Thank you for changing history. You were the best of us. Thank you for all that you've taught me and for being one of my closest friends. I feel blessed to keep your books and recorded lectures and seminars with me forever. Hearing from a fraction of those whose lives you touched personally and reading the heartfelt posts all over the internet, I feel immensely grateful to have been so close to you. Thank you for being such a big support system, not only for me, but for hundreds of people all over the world. I'm blessed to call you my family and honoured to find out that you always talked about me, even in your final days. I will forever look up to you and I will carry on your ideals. Your life lessons I will keep with me forever, and your legacy I will pass on. You will always be in my prayers until we meet again, inshallah. In memory of Aziz Choudry, my parents and I have set up a foundation in my uncle's name. All the funds raised will be distributed amongst charities he was so passionate about. The donation link will hopefully be circulated during this memorial service, and if anybody has any feedback on any specific charities that Aziz Choudry was so passionate about, please contact me through Professor Salim, as we are still gathering the names of charities and forming the full list of charities which we will be distributing the funds amongst. Thank you for helping us carry his work forward.
Thank you for that beautiful insight to Aziz Choudry, Sana, and thank you to your family as well. I will now like to introduce a musical item that has been arranged by fellow students and some of the research postdoc fellows on our research chair. Sarah Black, Thandi Gametse, and Sonia Stein.
When the odds are stacked against you, exactly belief in meaningful change would be delusional, meters high. of a blissful afterlife is about the most logical source of hope. It is us that hold out for liberation in the here and now that are the fools. Deluded each morning as we arm ourselves with love to fight another losing battle. And each night as we relentlessly dream those freedom dreams. But I think that if they were ever to write about me in the history books, I would want to be known as that fool who, to the very end, believed love a credible weapon. The fool in whose eyes, until their final closing, sparkled echoes of a beautiful and impossible world.
Thank you to our students. Amazing talent. Prof. Salim, I think we could start a band in our chair. I would like now to introduce Mansoor Choudry, Aziz's brother, who's going to give a message on behalf of the family as well. Welcome, Mansoor. Mansoor, can you hear us?
Hello, hi.
Hi, Mansoor. Yes.
Hello, hi, everybody. Hi, June. Hi, Professor Salim. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's joining from all around the world. Would like to thank everyone for joining today and also for creating this webinar so that we can listen to everybody. My name is, as June said, I'm Mansoor Ahmed. I'm Aziz's brother. I'm 3-4 years older than him, but he was a lot older than me in upstairs. I am very grateful for you to have me here. I'm just going to go through. I took some notes down and I thought, well, I'll speak about this and I'll say this and I'll say, but that's all been, that's probably not going to be in that sequence. But I can just mention a few things growing up. With Aziz in London. Aziz, from a very young age, was a very gifted and a very intelligent child. In London, he went to one of the best schools probably still around here, a school called Whitgift School in Croydon, on a scholarship in his sort of junior school. And he stayed there, until 16, 17, until he completed his A-levels on a full scholarship. That school is still up to this day. It's a very respectable school. I remember that he sort of did his A-levels, and normally A-levels in UK are 2 years, and after the second year, you go into university. But Aziz, after the first year, after completing his first year, he went and sat an exam to go to Cambridge, and he was offered an unconditional place to go to Cambridge the following year. If I remember correctly, I think, don't quote me on this as such, but the word was, what we heard from family and friends and parents was that Aziz had been told by the university that really there was no need for him to complete his A-levels. He had an unconditional place to come next year to Cambridge. And, he was 17 at that time. And I think that's when, he decided to take a gap year, and he went to New Zealand. I think Professor Salim mentioned something that, he took up activism and things in 1988, but I think he left UK in probably end of 1983 or 1984. And he just never came back. New Zealand just became his home. I used to get letters from him, and he just loved New Zealand so much. I think, maybe coming out of a big city, he just liked everything about New Zealand. He used to write to me, and he worked at farms. And I remember him telling me that when I said, "What are you doing, Aziz?" And he said, "Oh, we're picking potatoes in a field or something." And this was not the Aziz that, that had left UK, but that's what he wanted to do. And, but from a very early time that he just sort of said that, this is, and he just loved New Zealand so much. And, yeah, I may be jumping from here and there, but just going through memories. And he came back to England, and, he wanted to now go to Pakistan and connect with that side of his roots, and just to be more culturally aware. And I remember him, just sort of going to Pakistan and spending, I think, a good 6 to 9 months there, learning the language quite well, just culturally. And even when he was in Pakistan, he went to very, very remote places, the areas that even to this day I wouldn't travel. I remember my father was quite worried that, he was traveling to all the rural areas, all the mountainous areas, all the small villages. And somehow, that's what he wanted to, even at that time, he just liked the simple life, that from that, it just sort of, I mean, and I think, you know, when he saw that, that's when he changed him. I think he just went into the you know, his fighting for active, you know, for the poor man, or for the you know, any injustice. And Aziz was there, kind of, you know, even talking about it and things. But then when I thought about all of this, you know, as I mentioned before, Aziz had gone to this school in London, which is a predominant, you know, it's a very good school, but I think, you know, growing up in London in the 60s and 70s, 80s, you know, it was very difficult, you know, if you happen to be an Asian, or if you happen to be Black. And I think, you know, the school was very good, but I think Aziz, you know, that sort of, those were tough times as well, right? Even in those, even in that. And I think that, you know, the academically it was very good, but I think it was tough. You know, it was just very tough growing up in London in the 60s and 70s, as you know, as everybody knows. But I mean, you know, I mean, I really don't know what to say, because this is still, it's just so raw, and we, you know, and everywhere we look around the house, we see Aziz. Sorry. I mean, I don't know what to, I mean, how to sort of, you know, I mean, say a few more words, but you know, childhood memories, and you know, we grew up together, playing in parks, going swimming, things like this, which you know, most siblings do. There was a picture on the photo session that you showed, where Aziz sitting with my sister, who's just a couple of years older than me, and Aziz was also, you know, maybe because we were sort of the young ones, he was very close with her as well, and we have, you know, different memories, you know, very, we, maybe us three were the ones that sort of played together more, and you know, but I think, you know, I mean, really, I'm just, what I'm trying to get to is that, you know, even though Aziz had left the UK, you know, when he was 18 or just under 17 or 18, and physically he had gone, and he would come back here every year, once or twice a year in the last, but really he was still very, very close to us. You know, I just always knew where he was. First it used to be letters, aerogrammed letters, postcards, then it got to emails, and very, like my daughter said, very recently, you know, he discovered this phone, which when he was in Canada, you know, I said to him, Aziz, come and get a mobile phone, or get this cell phone, and he would just say, no, that's just not me. But I think when he went to South Africa, he just, you know, said, look, everything's on WhatsApp here, everything, and he had to sort of learn that, and we were so happy, you know, that we could, you know, just phone him whenever. But you know, he was just one of those souls that wherever he went, he just left his mark on children, on adults, on, you know, on wherever. And I think within our own family, we have a very extended family, nephews, nieces. I'm sure that everybody feels that, oh, I thought that Aziz was my chacha. I thought Aziz was my uncle. I thought Aziz was my brother, you know. He just had that influence, and I'm sure there are a lot of friends around the world who have that same feeling, that, you know, he just made you feel special. You know, I mean, it's so I think that's hence, you know, that we've had, you know, we're very thankful for all the messages that we've had, messages of support, and it really does help us, you know, to hear about Aziz at this very difficult time. You know, I must admit that, you know, academically, he was just our brother, right? You know, we just saw him as an uncle or a chacha, and he'd come here and explain things to us, but it just kind of went over our heads, really. We were not really aware of what he did outside. I mean, we knew he wrote books and he did some marches and things like this, but it was way above, and it's only now that we're really coming to terms and finding out from close friends of Aziz and colleagues and his students that really what Aziz meant to everybody. And that's, it's sort of painful, but in a nice way. I think I've said enough. I think, I mean, you know, I mean, I have so many things to say, but I don't think I have the strength to say them really. And it's just really, very, very sad. I'd just like to once again just thank everybody who's reached out to us, and personally pay tribute online as well to all his, and all, you know, myself and my family and all our extended family. You know, we really are so grateful for the University of South Africa, Professor Salim, especially, you know, in this time, difficult time, who's always been in contact with me and helped me through this difficult time, letting me know what's going on, everything but in South Africa. So once again, thank you everybody. And I'd just like to finish with a little verse from the Quran, which we always say when somebody passes away, and that is Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, which in meaning in English it says, it just indeed to Allah we belong and to Allah we shall return. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mansoor. We see your pain, we share your pain, and we hope that all that's shared today helps somewhat to lighten that pain, and we send solidarity to you and the family. It's actually quite stark to see your face on the screen, Mansoor, because of the likeness between you and Aziz. Even the tones in your voice sound much like Aziz. You're very right that Aziz was Chacha to so many children. And in fact, he was also Chacha to my co-chair's son, Muzi. And without Nadima knowing, Aziz would send real heavy metal and rock music to Muzi and helped him develop a love for that kind of music. And of course, Nadima discovered and wondered where this eclectic taste in music came from, and it was from Chacha Aziz. So at this point, we will start the next part of our program, and I'm going to hand over to Comrade Nadima to co-chair the next session. Over to you, Nadima.
Thank you, June. Evening, everybody. It's good to be in the presence of people who knew and loved and followed Aziz, either personally or through his work. And I'm sending everybody heartfelt condolences on our collective loss. So that, as June mentioned at the beginning of the program, we received many tributes from across the world, and we put out a call for people to send what they could, and many people are still struggling to understand the loss and what Aziz meant to them. So we've had the hard job of having to go through the tributes, and due to time limitations and technological limitations, we've included what we could. And as we have mentioned, we will find a way to share what we could not include. So the next set of tributes that we're going to share are pre-recorded tributes from close friends and colleagues of CERT and of the chair, and they include the following people: Carol Ann Spreen, Leon Tickley, Sangeeta Kamat, Nisha Tapliel. Please forgive me if I do pronounce things a bit incorrectly. Mario Novelli and Rebecca Talo. Francesco, if you could start those.
Good day, everyone. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm Carol Ann Spreen, a professor at New York University and a visiting professor at CERT. I've known Aziz for over a decade, which seems like a short period of time given all that Aziz has done and been involved with over the years. But as most of you who know him can attest, once you get to know and really connect to Aziz, you have found an intensely passionate, socially committed, and intellectually brilliant friend. Aziz's untimely death is a great loss to so many of us, and to the world. As this last week has brought to light, Aziz has been involved in so many movements and struggles, contributed so much academically and personally, touched so many lives as a friend, mentor, comrade, colleague. For him, this work was a deeply personal endeavor, and he worked tirelessly for social justice. It's so important that we take this time to remember him and celebrate his life. I don't need to repeat all of Aziz's many accomplishments. They are well covered by these beautiful testimonies from around the world today. So I'll share more of a personal insight. I was fortunate to get to know Aziz through his numerous collaborations with my partner Salim. The three of us spent countless hours talking about our work, our ideas and inspirations, about the state of the world and challenges ahead. We were in and out of each other's classrooms, kitchens, and bookshelves. If I was ever struggling to find a good critical read on almost any topic, I would call Aziz and he would shower me with pages of references, videos, names, and ideas. He was intellectually tenacious, gobbling up the critical works, chewing them over, and making a feast out of them to share with all of us. This food analogy really popped up because Aziz was also a wonderful cook, and he loved to share meals with friends. His magnetic spice containers hang over my stovetop to this day, inspiring many delicious curry meals. He once had me and Salim walk several miles in my tango heels across Buenos Aires to find his favorite paella place. True to his roots, he also made us stay in the Bowen Hotel with no heat or hot water in winter to help the struggling workers collective at this historic building. We also shared a love of music, traipsing around through cold Canadian winters, amusing ourselves with world music and the latest soundtracks. Although I often questioned his taste in music, and we competed for years, sending each other the worst music from the 1980s that we grew up with. Aziz cared deeply about the world with his words, his actions, and in his heart. And he appreciated the brilliant, beautiful side with the riches of people and the culture that they have to offer. He shared with me a book of poetry written by friends, and he never hesitated to pick up the phone or send a quick message that you had been on his mind. He also felt deeply for the dark, ugly, problematic side, and he spent his life challenging injustices everywhere. His life should be an inspiration and a call to action for all of us. Regardless of the challenges that we personally face, there should be no excuses, no apologies. We have to work together to do this. We have so much work to do. So just get out there, be present, and do some good. Honor his memory. Rest in power, my dear friend Aziz.
Hello, my name is Leon Tickley. I'm Professor in Education at the University of Bristol and a visiting professor at the Centre for Education Rights and Transformations at the University of Johannesburg. Last week, we lost an outstanding comrade who was passionately committed to social and environmental justice. Aziz, your life, although cut cruelly short, was a remarkable journey in which you touched the lives of so many people through your scholarship, activism, and human kindness. You left a mark wherever you went. You were the great connector, bringing together people, ideas, and continents with your passion and commitment. Whether in struggles against racism, colonialism, and neoliberal globalization, or in support of workers' rights, indigenous peoples, Palestinians, and migrants, you were always on the front line. On the occasions when I had the good fortune to meet you, you impressed me with your quiet intelligence, warmth, sense of humor, and ability to listen. We shared many intellectual and political interests, and our life journeys coincided at key points, being of similar ages and backgrounds. We were both politicised during the Thatcher years in the UK and in the context of the anti-racist and anti-apartheid movements in the 1970s and 80s. Your critique of neoliberal globalisation in the 1990s and 2000s influenced my own thinking, along with that of many others at the same time on these issues. We were both visiting professors at CERT, and I was looking forward to continuing our relationship in your new role as Centre Director. Aziz, you will never leave us. You will be forever in our hearts and continue to inspire and to mobilise us. Your legacy is there for all to see. Your work on social movement learning remains truly groundbreaking and an invaluable resource for future generations of activists. Your scholarship and activism have left a profound imprint on my own thinking, and I am eternally grateful for the insights and inspiration you have provided. Hamba Kashle, go well, Comrade Aziz.
Hello, I'm Sangeeta Kamath, and I'm here in New York City, and joining this memorial, with a great deal of sadness and loss. This has been, so very unexpected, and something that I think is going to take all of us a lot of time to come to terms with. I got to know Aziz actually even before I got to know him as an academic, even though we're in the same field. It was not sort of in the conferences that I met him or got to know his work, but really through the activist circles. And I really have to thank my partner, Biju Matthew, who was in Canada for a conference on Hindu nationalism in Montreal, and somewhere in the early 2000s, and that's where he met Aziz, and he came back. And I remember on his return from Montreal, he was like, I met this amazing person who's in your field, Aziz Choudry, and do you know him? And I was like, well, he's in our field, but someone who is not someone who's going to show up to our conferences, what I realized later, even though one tried to persuade him much, to try and come to panels and be part of things there, but he really didn't see it as worth his while for very good reasons, and instead really chose to be very much present in more activist and movement circles. I've written a small tribute to Aziz and that I'm going to read out. Dear Aziz, we lost you too soon, dear comrade. This month we would have celebrated your 55th birthday. Though knowing you, I imagine you were not into birthday celebrations at all. Instead, you would have preferred to celebrate a victory of the BDS campaign or the US defunding Israel, imagine that. Anything that would bring the Palestinians closer to their struggle for freedom and justice. This is who you were across the board at all times to everyone, hungering for justice more than anything else. You are a rare gift to the Academy, setting an example for your peers and young people for how to be true to the purpose of social justice in a neoliberal competitive academy, refusing to be diverted into its petty careerist ways. Instead, you focused your energies on validating and affirming people's struggles and social movement knowledge in classrooms and seminars and through your prolific publishing. And I'm just so thankful that you wrote a book a year. In 10 years, you wrote 10 books, and we have that to fall back on in this time of loss. Defying convention, you made research and activism seamless, breathing new life into both. And I think this memorial attests this best, that no one did this better than you, bringing these two worlds together. You had no patience for the conference circuit and preferred instead to be among movement intellectuals and activists. I remember the precious evening in Montreal with Salim, Caroline, and Mustafa. You had cooked us a wonderful meal. We were like, oh, this is also among your many talents. It was 10 years ago that we gathered in this way, made memorable by your witty, acerbic humor that I think everyone associates us, so much with Aziz. Who thought we would not have the opportunity to repeat an evening in your company? It is a loss we will carry with us forever. The loss of unfinished conversations, of projects, collaborations, of time unspent. We're going to return to your work again and again. I know this for sure. It is the legacy you have left us, and we will do our best to honor it. Your work will be the seeds that will germinate new scholar activists. Your work will be discovered by movement organizers again and again as essential reading. Your work will feed the hunger for justice that is growing around the world. Rest in power, Aziz Choudry. You were one of a kind, a rare gem. We were lucky to know you. Your generosity, political commitment, and intellectual clarity will be our guiding light and continue to be the inspiration the world needs. I just want to say a big thank you to Salim Valley and his team there at the center in Johannesburg for organizing this and for giving us this opportunity. I know it's been such a shock for him and for everyone there, and to do this for all of us, to hold space for all of us. Deeply grateful. Thank you so much.
My name is Nisha Tatyal, and I'm an academic at the University of Newcastle in Australia. And I would like to pay tribute to my friend and a most remarkable human being, Aziz Choudry. I met Aziz at a conference in Argentina in 2012. I think we spent a total of 1, maybe 2 hours together during that 3-day conference. But he kept in touch with me ever since. His emails would drop into my inbox at regular intervals with recommendations on what to read, what music to listen to, and who to laugh with. Last year during the pandemic, when I really needed to laugh, he introduced me to Mourn and a whole lot of other South Asian comedians. He also tried to introduce me to metal music, but unfortunately my response was not as enthusiastic as I think he would have liked. For someone who was not on social media, he usually knew more about what was going on there than I did. I also had the privilege of contributing to some of his writing projects and receiving his feedback on my writing whenever I needed it. In learning activism, Aziz wrote that change is mainly driven by ordinary people, consciously organizing, learning, and creating knowledge together to understand the workings of hegemonic power knowledge and taking steps to bring about social change. For this and so many other reasons, knowing Aziz has changed the way I think about and participate in activism, how I understand activist knowledge production, and what my role can be as an activist scholar in the corporate settler academy. For all of these lessons, I thank you, Aziz. You and your work will always be with us.
In the passing of Aziz, we have lost a great comrade, freedom fighter, international solidarity activist, prolific writer, reluctant academic, teacher, popular educator, and friend. Aziz Choudry was the best of us, and his sense of humour was legendary. His commitment to the oppressed, the downtrodden, the voiceless never wavered. Anti-racist, environmentalist, socialist, Palestinian activist, trade unionist, and popular educator, his energy was life-enhancing. Aziz wore his heart on his sleeve and was led by his principles. He rarely talked about himself, his personal achievements, and his life stories, and underplayed his roles, both in activism and academia. But we all knew we were in the presence of someone very special, and we were happy and proud to be his friend. Over the last few years, the University of Sussex, where I teach, has been integrated into his UK tours, where new book in hand he would travel the length and breadth of the country, promoting the content of his most recent book. The last time I was with him,
He joined me on our UCU picket line in January 2020 and then gave a teach out on the university and social justice struggles across the globe, just as he had done the year before for a different book. As one of my friends noted, Aziz was an academic activist rock star, touring around the country with his activist followers and fans. He filled his rooms with energy. His audiences were filled with interesting people and many old friends, and he always left us with a very few good one-liners to hum the following day. We miss you already, Aziz, and we will strive to follow your example, to continue those struggles and carry your memory into every classroom, march, picket line, boycott and protest. Rest in power, brother.
My name is Becky Tarlow. I'm an assistant professor of education at Penn State. And I met Aziz when I was still a graduate student at the University of California at Berkeley. I came from a family of labor organizers, and all I have ever cared about is being part of social change movements that address racial justice, social justice, climate justice. And when I met Aziz, I immediately found a mentor who could help me navigate these academic institutions that we're part of while being true to social movements. So I wrote this tribute for him that I would like to read. We should all strive to be Aziz Choudry. He did not get caught up in the bullshit. He was a brilliant academic, a prolific writer, a renowned scholar, a leading social movement theorist, but he would have laughed at all of those titles. He cared only about justice. He was my inspiration in an individualistic academic world that seemed so far removed from the social movements I care about. He showed me the value of theory, of ideas like social movement learning and social movements as knowledge producers, of intentionally creating a space in the academy for students of color, poor students, Palestinian students, students like myself who were conflicted about the role of academic institutions. Aziz was never conflicted because he was always clear about his purpose in the academy, to use its power and resources to support anti-racist struggles and migrant justice, to support trade unions and worker centers, to fight for climate justice, to condemn US imperialism and the war on Palestine. His engagement with academia was driven by his commitment to social movement organizing, which in turn was driven by his deep love for people. I personally benefited from that love, as Aziz became my mentor and friend. Before the pandemic, Aziz hosted me for a week in Montreal, organizing 5 book talks for me around the city, taking me out for meals with friends, and arranging a visit to the Immigrant Worker Center that he had supported for so many years. His dedication to uplifting the next generation of activist scholars was evident. During the pandemic, if we went a few months without talking, he would always send me an email, thinking of you. Most recently, he sent me an email reminding me that there were lots of uncles and aunties in South Africa for my newborn son to visit. Just 2 weeks ago, he went out of his way to help one of my students, not simply because I asked him for the favor, but because that is what he did. He was a giver. He gave his life to the fight for justice. We will honor you, dear Aziz, not by citing your work, although we will do that too. We will honor you by recommitting to our work with social movements and remembering the power of education for radical social transformation. As the social movement I work with the most, the Brazilian landless workers movement says, when we die, we get buried as seeds and we grow again, even more strong. Rest in power, my dear friend. I miss you so much.
thank you to all those who sent in tributes via video. We'll now be listening to a music contribution by Asha Gumedze. Thank you to Asha Gumedze for that original musical tribute for Aziz. Asha, together with Leanne Naidu, contributed a chapter in a book recently published, edited by Salim and Aziz, on the university and social justice. Now I'd like to introduce Rosalind Boyd from McGill University, who knew Aziz from 2004. Sarah, please.
Thank you. I'm really so touched by all the wonderful presentations and testimonies that I feel my text doesn't work. But thank you for allowing me a few moments to talk about Aziz, a beloved friend from 2003 when I first met him. He gave a presentation here, both feet on the ground, or a seat at the table, the price of being civil. It was an international conference with about 22 people and Latin Americans and a very important group looking at struggles in the Americas. But what I noticed when I went back to the introduction is that Aziz stood out. He stood out amongst them all. And I didn't know him. He was an extraordinary fellow. And the challenges that he presented at that conference were outstanding. He wrote about many of the topics that Salim has so eloquently outlined, and others too. He wrote about the uncivil society, about NGOism, and about his first trip to Canada, which was in 1997 for the People's Summit on APEC in Vancouver, remembered as SprayPEC. I should say that I'm speaking from Montreal, and I was for 40 years at McGill. And one of my last acts there in 2008, after the directorship, the center that I was running was just closed down by the neoliberals at the university, I happened to be put on as the external member of the hiring committee for this new position in the Faculty of Education at McGill. Oh, what good luck. I didn't know Aziz that well then. It was 2008. We had interacted on protests and demonstrations, but not the way that I got to know him after he became a member of McGill's Faculty of Education. I knew that he was the best of the 83 candidates, but I had to push, and I did push, because somehow the spirit of Aziz gave me courage to do many riskful things in that university. But 83 candidates, and he was the best, and I knew it. He hadn't even finished his PhD, but I knew he would do it soon. And when he did, he took up the position of Professor of Global Education. But it's what is extraordinary is there was no better person than Aziz, and the contributions that he made over the 12 years that he was actually at McGill were outstanding. And I knew that he would challenge the academic gibberish, the Eurocentrism, the neoliberal, all those issues that his other wonderful comrades have spoken about earlier. It is just extraordinary that I knew in my heart, in my 40 years of experience of activist work, that he would be the best person. He even managed to be awarded that 5-year research chair in social movement learning and knowledge production. But as I knew Aziz, he was a restless soul. He was multidimensional and a restless soul. And he stayed at McGill for that long, I think, because McGill is quite a conservative university, but he was able to travel frequently to South Africa and throughout Canada to carry out his scholar activist work. He was also sustained, as some others have mentioned, by his engaging work with the Immigrant Workers Center here in Montreal and his remarkable students who adored him, and the various community activists that he could always interact with. I have so many emails, as many of you do, attesting to his versatile character. He valued all of these friendships that he has established. And I found that he actively participated in those friendships with such generosity. Throughout my 20 years of getting to know him, he was always building solidarities, putting progressive activists and others in touch with each other. But he was also sharing ordinary things, a place that he loved. And he developed, I don't know if anybody's on from Malta, but he was twice there, and he really developed a love for that place. He said that I feel a calm and I can write there. Maybe he told others that too. And then when I was going to Nice, he very simply gave me a food choice. Be sure to eat soca in Nice. That was the greatness of our interaction. At times I even I felt he understood me better than I understand myself politically, especially the inner demons that I too experienced from a lifetime of social justice activism. When returning from South Africa and knowing my early connection with the anti-apartheid and labor struggles, he would bring books for me. Once from Eddie Webster, I don't know if Eddie is on here, but a founder of SWOPE and worked with the metal workers. And then another one about Paul Craven's book related to COSATU. He was so generous, and he would regale with stories about the wonderful comrades he had met there. Most recently, after he had settled in Joburg, he wrote about a lunch in Troyville he had with a group of you, where he was delighted to meet Roshan, a stalwart of the Palestinian solidarity scene, he said. And he was really pleased to begin this new chapter in his life with such welcoming and politically engaged comrades. And he reflected that, quote, Montreal seems so long ago and far away, and it's quite a strange feeling. My grief and sorrow at the loss of our great friend are overwhelming. However, I take solace in knowing that he lived full, meaningful life. And in his memory, many of us will continue even more firmly and deeply advocating the struggles he championed. In particular, I return to the struggles around Palestine and indigenous people. In his last email to me from South Africa on the Monday before he died, he had missed the session about labor for Palestine. But he knew that one of the speaker's homes had been raided by the Israeli military in Jerusalem while we were still online. He too understood what it was to have your home raided, as he spoke about that New Zealand experience. And yet he ended on an upbeat tone with praise for the Durban dock workers' activism refusing to download the cargo from Israel's ship, and also his praise for the younger generation of activists. In response to my perhaps naive suggestion that, quote, the international narrative on Palestine is surely shifting, I call it naive because at the same time, we're grappling with all that money going for the 735 million going to Israel, this apartheid state. It is just shocking to me that after the crimes against the Palestinian people, the terrorization, that they should be rewarded with military aid. But he wrote back to me when I said, and he said, well, apparently there are 180,000 on yesterday's London demo, a demonstration. The newer generation of activists for Palestine is good to see. He was so enthusiastic about all of you. And he was anticipating the Global Musicians Letter of Support for Palestine and the boycott of Israel, which has come out, I think, just 2 or 3 days after he died. So much more to account about his courage, his humor, and his disappointments. But I shall end, and really, I feel so honored to be in the company with so many absolutely wonderful people who know him and pay tribute to him. His volumes of published work and his worldwide network of friends, family, and scholar activists here today will surely help keep our comrade Aziz alive, as some have said, and relevant as the struggles continue. I offer my deepest condolences to all of you, and especially to his family. I've left out some of my text because there are others who must speak. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Rosalind, for your words. They resonate deeply with all of us, and even the ones that are unsaid. So thank you. Comrades, before my voice starts shaking and I'm unable to speak, let me introduce the next few tributes. They're all from comrades in South Africa, and they are all in various ways connected to the Center for Education, Rights and Transformation, and or the SARChI Chair in Community, Adult and Worker Education, of which Salim is the chairholder, and of which Aziz was so closely connected. We'll hear from Thandi Gumedze, Daryl Brahm, who is based in Cape Town, both of whom are based in Cape Town, Linda Chisholm, who's based at CERT in Johannesburg, Britt Barches, who's based in Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha, and Mondli Hlwatrayo, who's also based at CERT in Johannesburg. If we can start with Thandi.
Greetings to everyone who is joining as we celebrate and remember the life of Aziz. My name is Thandi Gumedze. I'm a student at UJ's Center for Education, Rights and Transformation, and I'm part of the Community, Adult and Worker Education Chair that Aziz was part of as well. I think I can speak on behalf of that whole community when I say what an incredibly devastating loss Aziz's passing is, but also when I say how grateful I am personally and we are collectively that he was part of this community and for the time that we got to learn with and learn from him. I think I will remember Aziz most for his incredible generosity, both in terms of the sharing of the immense knowledge that he had in terms of sending articles, sending books, but also in sharing encouragement and support. And I'm so thankful to have been on the receiving end of that support and encouragement many times. So to Aziz, rest in beautiful peace. You will be incredibly missed, but we will carry your legacy forward in our work, in our approach to work, and in how we orientate ourselves in the world. So thank you.
My name's Daryl Brahm, and I'm sharing a few reflections on my friendship with Aziz Choudry. There are 4 contexts that come to mind when I reflect on my friendship with Aziz, and I think it is a time to reflect on relationships as Aziz's passing leaves us with a deep sense of loss. There's much to celebrate about his life. My reflection on our friendship takes me to the qualities I saw and experienced of him as a public intellectual, as a friend, and as a comrade. And it is our friendship that stands out for me. The first context is our meeting in Port Elizabeth, the industrial and big brother city of the Eastern Cape. He was doing a talk at Nelson Mandela University on NGOization. Our first encounter with each other was a public space, and a public space was something that Aziz was very comfortable in as he shared his ideas and vast experience with others. Our engagement in this conference was the start of many conversations to come. I recall having to fetch him on a busy highway as he did not drive. Fortunately, he succumbed to having a very basic make calls only mobile phone. In his usual witty humor, he gave me an analysis of the gospel music he was forced to listen to in the public and ramshackle taxi that he used. The second context was when Alice, my partner, and myself spent time with him in Montreal. Aziz gave up his room for a week. His generosity had no limits. He invited us to McGill University, where he held a research chair position. Prestige of this kind never went to Aziz's head. He opened a space for me to speak to his students about South Africa. This is a practice that went against the grain of universities, as they would usually invite internationally renowned scholars into such a space. The third context is Aziz staying with us in East London and in Cape Town, which entailed long conversations over dinner and on long beach walks. Aziz's wide range of subjects that he could speak to, and equally a wide range of people he knew across the globe who he did intellectual work with. Conversation was a space where he shared his intellectual resources unselfishly and with freedom. At a personal level, Aziz was a caring person who always expressed interest in one's well-being. His commitment to build a better world was expressed through the strength of his intellect and through his sensitivity and appreciation of his fellow human beings. We miss you, Aziz, and will continue to draw on your legacy.
We apologize for the technical glitch. Could we ask Linda Chisholm to address us live, please?
Okay, thank you. Well, most of what I was going to say has actually been overtaken by several of the other speakers. So I'm going to do something slightly different to what I intended. Several of the speakers mentioned his humor. So I want to say something about that. Of course, he came to South Africa under terrible conditions, having spent a year waiting for his work permit and to be able to actually travel here. But during that time, or just before that time, I want to mention three incidents. The first was his interview. When he was interviewed for the job, there was the whole University of Johannesburg hierarchy sitting at the table, very seriously asking him the serious questions that get asked in these interviews. And then towards the end, one of the senior management members asked him, Professor Choudry, where do you actually come from? Because here's this person from McGill, Canada, speaking with this very, very British accent. And he said in this totally deadpan, sardonic way, in a way that I cannot reproduce. Well, of course, it goes without saying that he comes from London, but he said it so humorously, he completely won over the entire committee. So that was the one thing that I really remember very fondly about him. The other is also, just to repeat something that several people have mentioned, is how he was constantly showering people with references. We would sit in seminars with students. Didn't matter what their topic was on, what they were talking about, he would always have the most up-to-date, extremely progressive reference that would steer their thinking in the best possible way. He was unmatchable in that sense, and really, he will be a loss. There's absolutely no doubt about it. For our students and for our community that we are building around the chair with Salim, he is an absolutely immeasurable loss. And the final thing, the final incident I just want to talk about is the WhatsApp. Well, actually, it was our administrator, Katlego Chilwani, who introduced him to WhatsApp. And in true Aziz style, what he wanted to do was to write a paper about it, that he, the Canadian, the sophisticated traveler, the conference attendee, the activist, the one who knows more about most things than a lot of people, he's the one learning from a Black South African about how to use WhatsApp. He wanted to write a paper about this. He spent a lot of time with Katlego. Katlego helped him transport his books from his house where he was living in Auckland Park to his office. And you could just see in the way that he was unpacking the books, meticulously placing them in the bookshelves, you could just see from that what his love of books actually was. He had a deep, deep, deep love of books in addition to everything else that everybody else has spoken about. And there were many, many, many of them. There were many boxes that have not been unpacked. And I think that that's partly, in a sense, what I want to end with, is that these kinds of tributes, we're unpacking a person, but we have not finished unpacking the really rich, rich life and intellectual contribution that Aziz made to our community. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Britt, and I'm going to share a poem that I wrote for Aziz. I called it Your Pink Painted Nail for Aziz. What do I remember most about you, Aziz? It must be that pink painted nail. Your interpretation of the dress code for a wedding we attended. Black and white with a touch of pink. Quirky, Aziz. The activist academic. No ivory tower for you. Never, and I mean never, too busy to assist when needed, proofreading a report, suggesting a text or two or three, recommending a person to help with this or that. You walked a lot, but I remember you sitting, laptop always in hand. You never learned to drive, but went to many places. Not a big social media person, but always connected. I will miss your jokes. Some I still don't quite get. Wacky, outrageous, crazy. I will miss you, Aziz. I will miss that pink painted nail. Rest in peace. Love, Britt.
Comrade Mondley.
Okay, comrades. Yeah, let me start. Look, I was introduced to Comrade Aziz by Comrade Salim, and I shall always be grateful for that. When I first met to Comrade Aziz, I really didn't see him as an academic. And yet, of course, he has achieved a lot in that regard. You know, he was a prolific writer. He was a good academic. He was good when it comes to supervision of students, and people spoke about that, right? And for me, what I liked about Comrade Aziz was that he was very close to the working class and its struggles all over the world. I remember taking him to Orange Farm, that's a working class area in the south of Johannesburg. And the one thing I liked about Comrade Aziz is that he was not that type of a revolutionary or a socialist carrying a briefcase full of ideas. No, he listened. He would listen to comrades in Orange Farm, you know, when they were articulating their struggles. For me, that was very, very important because he was a good listener. And for me, I think that's a lesson for all of us, that we have to listen, right? Especially when people from the working class speak. Let's not just come with our own, you know, preconceived ideas. And I think for me, that is one of the key lessons that I've learned from Comrade Aziz. Number two, Comrade Aziz took the language question seriously. I remember, you know, Comrade Aziz asking me, Comrade Mondley, what language now talking about a local language must I learn in order to understand the views and struggles of the local people. We had a small debate, you know. I said, okay, I think maybe learn Zulu. Then I said, no, maybe learn Sotho. So, but he was really committed to understanding people's languages, because really you can't have a full understanding of people and their struggle without understanding their language. And for me, that was an important characteristic of the late comrade Aziz. When it comes to racism, he took it seriously. He was a comrade who was really committed to the struggle against racism. I would talk to him about struggles against racism here in South Africa, overseas, and he knew the literature. I mean, we used to discuss the history of the Black Panther Party, and he knew the literature, right? And another issue that I want to raise about comrade Aziz is that he touched many souls. And for me, what was important about him, he was not really impressed by someone being a professor, being this big academic, or big intellectual. He also had very strong relationships with our comrades here, who do very, very important work, which is not always valued by the system, right? Like, for instance, I was talking to Comrade Mpumi Cebekulu about Aziz, and I asked her, I mean, how would you describe Comrade Aziz? Comrade Mpumi said to me, look, Aziz cared, Aziz listened, Aziz was always sharing, Aziz was always wanting to know, how are you, comrade? You know, wanting to understand your own personal struggles. And again, as the comrade Linda mentioned, Aziz was also close to Comrade Katleho, who's also one of our administrators. You know, he's the one we introduced him to WhatsApp. He's the one who helped him with, you know, opening a bank account, and you know, they had a very strong and a very close relationship, right? And another thing about, you know, comrade Aziz was that he is a comrade who was always willing to share, not only knowledge, but, you know, resources. You know, like for instance, he would bring us gifts. Now we've got tea here at work. We got it from the comrade, right? So for me, he was very, very, you know, sharing, and we liked, you know, that. And also, I mean, I had a comrade like comrade Ibrahim would, you know, talk about how he would share references on you know, struggles against racism. So let me stop there, comrade, and let me just say farewell, Comrade Aziz. Farewell, my brother. Farewell, my comrade. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you, Comrade Mondli. The next is a recorded message we received from Luke Sinwell on behalf of the UJ, the University of Johannesburg Centre for Sociological Research and Practice. We're sorry for the technology, comrades. The voice note is not playing. So we're going to forge ahead and hopefully we can come back to this particular tribute from the Centre, the UJ Centre for Sociological Research and Practice. I'm now going to call on fellow members of CAWE and the Chair, Terry Maggot and Roshan Dadu, who's already been introduced as the South African BDS convener. Terry is going to read tributes from Mahaley Gerber, a new friend of Aziz that he made recently in Johannesburg. And Terry will also read a tribute from Bob Broughton and Deborah Durnan from Red Rock in Australia. Over to you, Terry.
Thank you, Nadima. Oh, sorry. Okay, so here's a message from Haley. She says, I did not know Aziz long and I did not know him well, but for the very short time that I did know him, it was apparent that he was a smart, sensitive and devoted person, deeply committed to justice and dignity. When Aziz heard that I was applying for the position of Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Lead in the department I work at, he was beyond supportive. He generously shared information, insights, and resources to help me with the process. And when I got the position, he continued to champion me on. Aziz left me a file on his Google Drive packed with useful resources for my new position. He also introduced me to Sarah Ahmed, both indicators of his astute scholarliness, activism, and generosity. I'm sorry that we never got to do the celebratory meal we said we would. Aziz had only been in Joburg for a short while, arriving during a difficult time with everyone isolating and the city quite locked down. Yet he still managed to have a small taste of what our city has to offer, from eating at the Troyville Hotel and Dosa Hut in Fordsburg, to walking the Marvel copies and visiting the musical fountain in Rosettenville. He hung at the roving Bantu kitchen with friends who collectively make Joburg the crazy, fantastic city it is. I'm glad he managed to get a taste of our city and its people, our staunch and tight-knit family of mavericks, misfits, rebels, and comrades, where he would easily have found a comfortable home. My condolences go out to Salim. You and Aziz have a long, engaged, productive, and heartfelt relationship, and the loss must be immense. And also to all Aziz's family and friends and comrades who have loved, known, worked, and shared with him over the many, many years. I didn't have the fortune of many years, but I will eternally remain grateful for the short time. No doubt for all, Aziz will remain an inspiration and a guiding light in our fight for a more just and humane world. And then I've also got a message from Bob and Deborah. They say, by the time we met Aziz in Canada in 2013, his work on social movement learning had already been helping us for several years to reflect and write about popular education in Australia and Timor-Leste. But until we actually met him, we had no idea what a huge heart and generous spirit of solidarity underpinned those passionate critiques he wrote, or what a great history of activism he had been part of, including just over the ditch in the anti-US bases movement in Aotearoa years before he entered academia.
For the last 8 years, there have never been a time when he was not, when he has not responded to requests for advice or help with our work. And when we had the chance to work together on one of his books, it was absolutely a pleasure and a privilege. Aziz was that rarest of scholars in the West, a genuine and totally committed socialist activist. We will try our best to honor Aziz here in Australia by keeping that flame alive. We send our condolences and solidarity to the family, friends, and comrades of Aziz gathering from around the world to remember him this weekend. Thank you, Nadima.
Thank you, Terry. Now I call on Roshan Dadu to share a brief message from Caroline Hodes from the University of Lethbridge. Thanks.
Thank you. Caroline says, I recruited Aziz to be part of the School of Graduate Studies in late 2020 and to join an MA committee for Jennifer Prosser's thesis. Aziz had a rare combination of generosity, integrity, commitment, and engagement that made him very special to us. He provided exceptional support and guidance to both Jen Prosser and Arturo Tejada Torres, who was a PhD candidate. And no matter what the time difference was, he came to their talks and raised the discussion and level of engagement for everyone in the room. He really was one of the brightest lights in academics. I know his loss is being felt deeply and globally. We spoke to him less than 2 weeks before we heard the news, and the shock and sadness have been overwhelming. He not only mentored graduate students at the University of Lethbridge, he also mentored faculty, myself included. I knew him only a short while, but his ability to bring people together and create connections made me feel like my own work had a purpose and importance that I had not felt before. Thanks.
Thank you, Roshan. We received a picture tribute from Anne Peterman and Oren Langele, which we will display on the screen now for you to read. Sorry, comrades, the gremlins have got in. We're struggling to put the picture up and we'll do so as soon as we're able. Could I now please call on Mustafa Henaway? Mustafa worked closely with Aziz at the Immigrant Workers Center and many other initiatives in Montreal. And he is with us today. If I could ask Mustafa to please give his live tribute.
Thank you, Nadima, and thank you, Salim. And you know, when I first was asked, I thought maybe I had more of the strength to do this than I did throughout the past 2 hours. But I'm going to try as long as I can. So, I mean, when I felt when Mansour and Sana were speaking about Aziz, that this kind of this cloud of mystery, I felt that was the same experience I had with him, because I didn't first know him. I knew him generally through activism and our involvement as things, but I was his roommate, and so I had this very different experience. I just moved to Montreal. I was new to the city, and Stefan Christophe, a good friend also of Aziz, asked if I could sublet his room and live with this guy, Aziz Choudry, and I said, why not, right? And it was absolutely the cloud of mystery that Aziz, this mystique that Aziz had always had, that was part of his charm, that I think for the first 2 weeks he wasn't even there. I would just get a note, I'm in Italy in a conference, I just gone to a workshop, I'll catch you the week after. and I was always astounded by his life, and I didn't realize his brilliance until this odd moment, and Linda brought it up in her talk, his love of books. And it was, I never still brought it up to him to this day, actually. So Aziz, you're hearing it now for the first time, is that he had been gone somewhere, and all of a sudden this loud bang just rippled through our apartment. And I was like, what happened? And nothing had seemed broken, nothing had gone wrong. And then I'd open the door to his room, and he had so many books that all of his bookshelves had collapsed at the same time. It was just this flurry of books across his room, and I had the most, I was like, I could either fix all of his books and try to deal with this, but I barely know the man. Will he accuse me of going through his room and his stuff? You know, and or do I just close the door and pretend that I never heard it and that I left the door closed the entire time he was gone? I mean, I chose the latter. Aziz, you're finding that out now. I didn't know that all your bookshelves collapsed. And I was at awe. And ever since then, I mean, when he came back, he was always, and I guess I realized this more and more since his passing, how much of a big brother he was to me. You know, he wasn't, it was beyond just being a sort of a comrade or someone who would organize with. He really was a big brother. He was a mentor, and he'd always open doors for me that and believed in me that I can't, I don't know other people that have. I would have not.
Mustafa, thank you. Thank you for your word.
I thought I would be able to say more, but I just want to say one last thing, is that, you know, he fought for everybody. He fought for people who couldn't, and whether it be on an individual level, whether it be on a collective level. And he always, and everyone has talked about his giving just endlessly. And I think the two things that I hope is that, you know, his legacy has always been that connector, but that he doesn't have to carry that burden anymore. And what we can do is just to keep that, what he built, alive without him, and that, so that he doesn't have to carry that burden anymore, and that wherever he is, that he doesn't have to fight anymore, that not to rest in power, but wherever he is, he's finally in peace.
Please, guys, could we give him some privacy? Thank you, Mustafa, for sharing with us. And all I'm thinking is deep breaths, because we're going to try and play the message from Luke Sinwell now. Comrades, if you'd please bear with us. We want to give everybody the space to have their voice.
This is Luke Sinwell from the Center for Sociological Research and Practice at the University of Johannesburg. We have a firm working relationship with CERT, also at UJ, where Aziz was recently appointed as director, and we are mourning his loss. Rather than merely extract from grassroots movements, we pride ourselves in forging a democratic partnership whereby working class communities in particular are empowered throughout the research process. We viewed Aziz as a partner not only in decolonizing or transforming the curriculum, a much needed task in itself, but in revolutionizing the way teaching and learning and research is done within and outside of higher education institutions in the country. I was one of the many young scholars who was nurtured by Aziz more than a decade ago. At an international conference, he approached me, and I remember sitting with him on a bench after I gave a presentation. Aziz asked me to contribute a chapter to one of his books on NGOization. He told me he was looking for budding authors. At the time, I thought my work was not up to academic standards for major publishing houses. I learned later that perhaps it was not necessarily the quality, but the fact that it did not reflect the dominant style and neoliberal ideology. Aziz was not engaged in a social science detached from the lived experiences of ordinary people. It was geared towards understanding how to overcome injustices in society, the hidden, often subtle ways in which people organize and learn in order to change the world in which we live. I personally looked up to and was inspired by Aziz. I wanted to be like him. I was given strength by the fact that he spoke to other people and thought my work was important. Young scholar activists need mentors so we don't lose them to the individualistic academic atmosphere associated with egotistical research rankings, citation indexes, and promotions. Let us commemorate Aziz by committing ourselves and the organizations in which we work to nurture and inspire young activists and scholars while we still can. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just take a moment to acknowledge our technical team for really doing the most. Okay, we've managed to get the picture up, hopefully, and we'll now show the picture tribute from Anne Peterman and Oren Langeli. Our final two tributes will be on behalf of the Palestinian struggle. The first will be read by Roshan Dadu, a close friend of Aziz and the convener of the South African BDS Coalition. We will end the tributes with a video from Adam Hania of the Faculty for Palestine and the Labour for Palestine.
Thanks. The South African BDS Coalition would like to extend our deepest condolences following the passing of our dear friend and comrade Aziz Choudry. In the brief time he spent in South Africa this year, he had already joined the Palestine Solidarity Campaign and participated in many of the SABDS Coalition meetings and webinars, contributing from his long experience of activism and analysis. Aziz, like all of us, was angered and saddened by the recent atrocities committed by the apartheid Israeli occupation forces and the genocidal bombing of Gaza. Yet he was equally inspired by the resistance of the Palestinian people and, as always, ready to build and strengthen our solidarity movement. Comrade Aziz, you've gone way too soon, but we will carry you with us as we continue the struggle for the liberation of Palestine. Hambagachle, Comrade Aziz, Amandla.
Thank you for the opportunity to say something at this event. I wish I could be with you in person to celebrate Aziz's inspiring life. I met Aziz about 20 years ago in Toronto and kept in regular contact with him since that time. In fact, the last time I saw him was on a picket line at my university in London, just a week or so before the pandemic struck. I wanted to share a few thoughts about this wonderful man. First, in relation to his writing and academic work, which have been such a great source of inspiration for so many people around the world. I often felt with Aziz that he had an uncanny sense of knowing what needed to be said way before anyone else. You could really see this in his books. The topics that they addressed would suddenly become incredibly prescient and necessary in the course of the struggle. I had the privilege of contributing to two of his many books. One, his book on learning from social movements, and another on migrant workers. He was a very rare kind of academic, someone who could write and engage with people in ways that were clear and actually mattered. His writing was always aimed at movements and social struggle, helping deepen our understanding of the world and helping people learn and think about how to fight better. I very often recommend one or two chapters from these books to my students, and they unfailingly come back to me, having read the whole book and having become new fans of Aziz. He had the healthiest attitude towards academia than anyone else I've ever met. He would use his position to really make a difference to students and also those outside of the university. He never got trapped in the comforts of academia, but was always asking, how can I actually make a real difference through this work? The second point, of course, was Aziz's long-standing commitment to Palestine. While many hide away from Palestine, he was always brave enough to speak out. And I'm sure if you'd been in Palestine over the last month, he would have been in the thick of the demonstrations. I really got to know Aziz very well through his long-standing and unflinching commitment to Palestine. He was instrumental as an activist in Labour for Palestine in Canada and also Faculty for Palestine, helping to write and pass resolutions, conducting awareness raising and educational sessions for workers, organising events and protests. He always knew how to speak to people about Palestine where they were at and convince them through his patience, through his wit, and of course, his hilarious sense of deadpan understatement. Although he lived in a different city from me and later a different country, he was always someone who would be there if you needed to discuss something or you weren't sure how to proceed. Again, someone whose political judgment you could trust 100% and who was truly an internationalist. All his work on Palestine, he would connect with other issues he was active around: migrant rights, state repression, anti-racism politics, the list goes on. I really didn't realize the breadth of Aziz's activism across the entire globe until moving to the UK about a decade ago. I've been constantly amazed by how many people know and respect Aziz from different movements in the UK. Migrant rights, anti-racist movements, labour movements, Palestine. Every time he visited, I would discover someone else who shared Aziz as a long friend. Thank you to all who organised this event. I'm sure everyone will say this tonight, but it bears repeating. The best legacy to his tremendous life is to continue the struggle. Thank you, Aziz, comrade, for everything. Rest in power.
Thank you so much to everybody who took the time out to send tributes, to make tributes, to share tributes, and who are still to do their tributes. It's still very raw, it's still very hard. And I'd like to now call on Salim Vali to close this memorial, but we now begin the work that Aziz began. Thank you, everybody. Salim.
Thanks, Nadima. It's very difficult to close this tribute, this honoring of Aziz. I don't want people to go. I'm sure there are many people who are still want to continue. I think there are many, many people like me who want to be with Mustafa right now. We feel the same way. I know how close Mustafa was to Aziz and how close many of the other people here. It's interesting that it's over 2.5 hours and there's still over 200 people listening to us. That says something. Aziz, together with a number of people, was privy to a discussion I had when we formed the chair, when we got the chair from the National Research Foundation, when I questioned why it should be called a chair. And I insisted we need to call it the sofa. And I think you understand why I felt that way, because we have these incredible people amongst us. And Aziz was very comfortable in this company. He had so much to offer. And he, I am convinced, would have found his place. What he had to say was appreciated, and it will be appreciated going forward. I think that there are a number of things that come to mind. I was not meant to give the closing, but because a number of our people are in situations where they are grieving, we have a situation of the third wave and we continue to lose people. What Aziz experienced with COVID last year in Montreal is quite important. What people around the world are experiencing in Brazil, in India, is vital for us to understand. It's quite clear that we have vaccine apartheid. It's quite clear that this is one of the injustices that cut very deeply, and that people like Aziz, sensitive people, feel so deeply, and that many of the ways of coping with a very cruel world, once that is taken away from us, our coping mechanisms are not there. And I think the dictum that says the healthy development of each is the condition for the healthy development of all is something we need to take very, very seriously. We need each other, and we have to be there for each other, that we can't trivialize the signs we might see. We need to support each other. I went through the things we talked about night after night since Aziz's passing. I read some of the material, and there are so many lessons there. Aziz has left us with a treasure. He kept trying to say something, even though he's not with us. He's telling us something. One of the things I've learned is what I've just said. There are many other issues. I think I agreed to step into to close this because I think I want to emphasize one or two quick points. One is how we felt strongly about the academy. And in a chapter, Lessons in Struggle, Studies in Resistance, we talked about and we used Sangeeta Kamat's articulation of the challenge for those of us who are working in universities, in the academy, to build and sustain, and in the words of Sangeeta, the school to movement pipeline, the importance of engaging with radical ideas, learning and knowledge from social movements, community struggles, and what Gramsci termed organic intellectuals, and Shivji in 2018 called revolutionary intellectuals outside of the universities. Aziz felt strongly that we have to do what we can at the universities, but we must consider the limitations and the possibilities of ideas and visions for social change, largely forged on campuses without involvement or engagement of movements and communities that are outside of camp. This is severely limiting. And he always felt strongly that we need to have these bridges, we need to network, we need to make these contacts, and we need to work together with people outside of the universities. He posed this question in our conclusion of this book: what are the horizons of possibility to reimagine education for liberation outside of the limited imagination of the neoliberal university and educational capitalism, and indeed outside the parameters of the liberal imagination? And that is the second point. The third issue is that he was always concerned about the new generation. And in the conclusion of the History Schools book, we wrote, the new generations of young people dissatisfied with inadequate explanations of the state of the world. That is the ecological, unprecedented ecological catastrophe we are facing, the pandemics that are still to come after COVID-19, the ultra right-wing nationalist, racist, populist examples of Trump and Bolsonaro and Modi and many others. And we said that the young are seeking ways to change this situation. They're searching for other ways of approaching and understanding history. And we wrote, we have encountered many young people who are hungry to learn about how people have struggled, what they have done, how they have envisioned alternatives, all as part of developing their own political, social, and environmental activism. And therefore, we felt that this intergenerational conversation and this intergenerational anti-capitalist dialogue is absolutely vital. And their history, the archives, play a vital role. And finally, we recognize, and Aziz more than many of us recognize, the urgent action that is vital on so many fronts today. And in the concluding paragraph of this book on history schools, we said, we remain convinced of the care and commitment needed to reflect, prepare the ground, plant seeds, and grow vibrant movements and politics of resistance, and of continuing to work through, in our different contexts, how we might critically conjure up the spirits of the past in the service of liberation. That chapter started with the famous quote by Marx about making history from the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, to critically conjure up the spirits. And we do that now with Aziz. We include in taking us forward his life example, his life struggle, his praxis, as we move forward. Many of us are hurting, but we will heal. We have a world to win. We have to struggle. We cannot give up. It's natural to give up. We have lost so much, but we have so much still to gain. We need each other. And all the hundreds of beautiful people who have come to listen to this tribute, we are there for you, and we need you, and we will go forward while we remember people like Aziz and many others who are not with us today. And I just want to thank the people who drove this commemoration, our students, our postdoc fellows, our visiting professors, our associates, our friends, and all of us are proud of you. And we have to stick together. There is a lot we can offer our country and the world. And let's continue to work together, and let's use the example of Aziz to strengthen us and to support each other. So thanks very much, Nadima.
Thank you, Salim. Thank you to the team behind the scenes. Thank you to everybody who offered tributes. We will see you in the other memorials. Please take care. Let's look out for each other. Good night and goodbye.